Start the recording. Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Transforming Assessment webinars for the 2nd of August. Today's session is on authentic assessment to develop integrated thinking. The speaker today is Dr. Kate May from the Trobe University in Melbourne, Australia. So, Kate, would you like to begin, please?
Thank you very much, Matthew. Can everyone hear me clearly? Matt, can you hear me?
Yep, all good.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So it's good to go. So thank you so much, everyone. Good evening. And my name is Kate, and I'm from La Trobe Business School. I'm very happy to join the webinar today to talk to you about developing integrated thinking for accounting students by authentic assessment design. So even though that I'm based in accounting discipline, but I designed this talk because in the way that we'll talk through the principles of integrated thinking so that it will be relevant to all of you, doesn't matter which discipline that you come from. So let's get started. First, I would like to, for those of you who are not located in Australia, whenever we start an event, you may be familiar, we will do acknowledgement of country. So La Trobe University acknowledges that this event and our participants are located on the lands of many traditional custodians in Australia. We recognize their ongoing connection to the land and value their unique contribution to the university and wider Australian society. We pay our respect to Indigenous elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend these respects to any Indigenous participant joining us online today. Great. So in this webinar, I will talk about first what is integrated thinking. Even though that we may have various ideas about what integrated thinking, because this is quite a popular term, but I think is in order for everyone to follow a webinar, we kind of have to land on one way of viewing this term. Then I'll talk about why integrated thinking is important in education. And when I mean education, I mean for all disciplines and not just accounting. Then I'll talk about assessment design to develop the student integrated thinking skill and the ecosystem. I'll touch base a little bit on the ecosystem of integrated thinking curriculum. The main focus would, of course, on assessment, because this webinar series is about assessment. So integrated thinking, or we can call it another name as system thinking. There's a various way of thinking about it. Is the most generous way of thinking about integrated thinking is that the ability to connecting the dots or connecting a different fields of knowledge or different topics within one discipline or different discipline within a field, the ability to see the connection between things, people, phenomena, events, right? So that is the most general way of thinking when we hear the term integrated thinking. But then, of course, when we want to teach the skills and when we want to have a more details into break it down into different components so that we can embed that into our course, then we can break it down into few components, as you see. First thing is to recognize there's a complexity in the world. That is ability to see the complex relationship and the interconnections between parts of a system or a network. So you know that in our life, basically everything is connected to everything else. Yes, I'm from this background, so you kind of hear some of that here. But the thing is, there's a trend in the systems research and proven from both sociology, psychology, neuroscience that things are connected in many ways, and therefore it is reflected in the way that we see the connections between different events, different parts, different processes in one phenomenon. And then it leads to this seeing will lead to the ability to see each other, because when you see things connected, you will develop the ideas to the skill to see another people's viewpoint and be open to other interpretations. And when we already open to other viewpoints and interpretations, then we will develop a way to be open to a different way to solve the problems when the traditional way to solve the problem doesn't work. And that is a very important skill to have, given that we are facing many changing in our life and as well as our business context. Okay, so from philosophical perspective, integrated thinking is not just a skill for the thinking, but it is more a worldview. And the worldview is like, it's reflect an ontological about the social world behaving like a natural world. So the natural world, the ecosystem, everything is connected to everything else. And it exists, is grounded in the worldview that life in nature exists in networks. In these networks, we are interconnected and interdependent on each other. And I would like to quote a quote from Friedrich Capra. He is very famous in system thinking and proposed philosophies for the teaching of the system thinking. The more we study the major problems of our time, the more we come to realize that they cannot be understood in isolation. They are systemic problems, which mean that they are interconnected and independent. So in order to solve the problem, we really have to have the system thinking. I'm grounded in accounting, which is like belong to the business. And in accounting field, we have a very big practice called integrated reporting. And integrated thinking is a key for the practice of integrated reporting. And therefore, they spend the whole, there's a whole book or whole publications are talking about the importance of integrated thinking to foster the practice of integrated reporting. And for them, it is about within organization, we should be able to realize that there are parts of organization and functions of organization, processes and teams and people are connected to each other. And the value that we create has to be viewed from a multiple perspective values and not just the financial value. And we have to consider value from environmental, social, and economic perspective. However, we are not just someone teaching business, we are educators. Every one of us, in addition to being a professions in our profession, we also an educator. So I also come from the educator's perspective, and I'm thinking about this more a deeper and a broader implication of this skill for our students. And it's, for me, is foster the other important cognitive, emotional, social, and employability skills. For instance, here I just can put down some of the skill that can be fostered if the student have the integrated thinking skill. For instance, when they have the integrated thinking, they can have the deep problem solving because they can see the connection between parts. And therefore, when they solve a problem in one part, they can think about the root cause that happened in another part. It is exactly the same like you have a pain in your head, and then you go to your doctors, and doctors say that you might have something going on in your legs. So it's not really something with your head, but something happened in your legs that caused a pain in the head. So that is more of the deep problem solving, the metaphor for that. And another thing is when you see the connection between the parts, you can see what other people come from. You can see how your works influence other works, or you can see how the change in one part influence other parts. So it fosters the collaboration because basically you understand the other perspective. And it fosters critical thinking because you start thinking from a different perspective and different stakeholders, different dimension, and therefore you can always question your own perspective because there are other perspectives available for your use. And it fosters individual accountability because you see when you work in a team, for instance, and then you see how your performance influence other people's performance and influence the whole team performance, you become more accountable because you see that impact. And when you can understand other people's perspective, it fosters empathy and inclusiveness. And that is not only something that we desire as individual in society, is important for workplace as well, because you know that one of the sustainability development goal is we have a well-being in the workplace and in our society, and empathy and inclusiveness is very important to foster the well-being of people. So that comes from that education's point of view, that I think integrated thinking is really important and worth our attention when we build the curriculum. Now, when we talk about the integrated thinking and how we embedded that into our subjects and build that into our assessment, then we should have a little bit kind of bird's eye view. So we build that from the course first, because every subject within a course serve a purpose to help the student to realize the learning outcome of the whole course. So we cannot ignore the course and just do whatever we want to do in our subjects. So I'll just give you an example, a Bachelor of Accounting at Trobe Business School. We have many subjects, of course. We have 24 subjects in a bachelor degree, but we have about 8 or 9 core accounting subjects. And because I'm the course coordinator for Bachelor of Accounting, so I can kind of influence on the design, the structure of accounting subjects, but not so much of other non-accounting subjects. So I'm just putting some accounting subjects in here. So when I look into different subjects within accounting degree, and I'm thinking about how to embed the integrated thinking in that, it can be embedded in each of the subjects, and it can be embedded in the way that we connect the subjects together. So for instance, in accounting's principle, the way that we design the learning activities and the way that we design assessment, how it can be connected to the next subject, which is accounting information system or the financial accounting. And then, for instance, the cost accounting, how it can be connected to the management accounting. So different topics in cost management accounting, how it can be connected to management accounting, and how it connected to other subjects like auditing and tax. So that is from the cost point of view, and then you can scaffolding that according to the subjects. But of course, today focus is more into the assessment of the individual subjects. So I'll get into the subject level. So the best way, according to a research, Miller is a very well-known researcher in the integrative thinking for the environment science studies. And then what he says is that if we want to encourage integrative thinking, we have to spend time to really assess the thinking process and really focus on the thinking process rather than just assessing the facts. So what does it mean is that when we design the assessment, is really about what we want our student thinking process to develop, and not really about the results or the facts of the assessment, but how the thinking being developed. And the most effective methods is to basically design a small or progressively assessment that link together, and those assessments cut through topics or cut through the subjects or cut through the specialization. So basically we will have a different levels of integration when we think about our assessment. So in a subject, we can have many different ways to embed the thinking patterns, and anything that we do, because I think it's not just human, but any living things on Earth, through its activities, through the way that it engage into the activities, that it's developed thinking patterns. And from the thinking patterns is going to determine what we see. And education, I consider education as a mind construction industry. And when we design the activities, we design assessment and the learning resources, we change the wiring of our students' brain and the way that they think. And I'm going to talk about assessment today, but just bear in mind that integrated thinking cannot just be in the assessment, it has to be in all the components around the assessment. And that will be a slide, the last slide, where I talk a bit about the ecosystem of the integrated thinking assessment. So for me, that is what my experience, right? The design of assessment to foster the integrated thinking. The best way to do that is we mimic anything that happened in the real world. So because the nature of any of our activities in the real world is always connected, is always integrated. And somehow when we want to teach the students about a profession, we have to divide one phenomenon into different pieces. And then we teach that as one piece of a puzzle. And normally when we design our assessment, we focus more on the content and the learning outcome of one subject. And if we too much focus on that, we lose track of how it's connected to other parts or other pieces of the puzzles. So when first we reflect on what our students do in the profession, and then we say, okay, in order to do this task, then what kind of skills and knowledge the student will need to have, and then we will definitely come up with a list of the knowledge that come from a different subjects and a different disciplines, and even outside the disciplines that we normally deal with in the business school, in the business field, or in the health or medical, in the field. So when we design assessment, we will resemble the real world context as much as possible. And the real world context, of course, is very messy, as you know, it's ambiguous. And basically, normally the information will never be provided in the full. So we're always missing some sort of information. There's always some sort of uncertainty in the real world context. And in that assessment, when we design that and we design the requirements, then it's normally we will rely on the way that we sequencing the task, that the student have to use the finding of the first task to do the second task. And that will foster the connection between the first task and the second task and the next task and the next task. So if you're sequencing the task based on the logical or the connections that it normally happen in the real world, then the student will naturally develop that kind of thinking. If it's also required the student to develop their personal opinions, that might be different or in conflict with others. But if they have to work in group, then the ability to resolve the conflicts between the team members also foster the integrated thinking, because now they have to engage into seeing other people's perspective and they have to resolve that. Or it will have to require them to employ the knowledge from multiple topics or multiple subjects or multiple disciplines. So you can purposely design assessment that require the knowledge space to be going above what you teach in the subject, but of course has to be something that the student already done in their course. So you have to see what are the subjects that have been taught earlier than your subjects, and then you can scaffolding those subjects in. And the assessment can also consider the multiple perspective of multiple stakeholders. So for instance, I'm from accounting, and accounting typically will produce reports, and we produce different kind of reports about the organization, and depends on the audience of the report, the tones, and then the nature of the content will be different. So if a report that's going to be sent to multiple kind of stakeholders with multiple interests, then the students start to have to think about, okay, what kind of tones I'm using here, what kind of language I'm going to use here, the format of the report, and the nature of the information, whether it should be in text or it should be in visual, image, and etc. Then it has to tailor to different kind of stakeholder, and then in that sense, they will have to develop the thinking about multiple perspective, multiple understanding on the same topic. Then the assessment should be also require them to work independently as well as in a group. And when working in the group, we have to make sure that the task is designed in the way that if they don't work together, they won't be able to produce a good work. So it is coming back to the first point when you see that the first task has to rely, the second task has to rely on the first task, or the next task has to be relied on the previous task. So if the student just tear out the assessment and do it by themselves, it will show in the quality of the assessment. Okay, so let's look into the subject that I designed. So just give you an examples of how I implement this kind of principle that I just talked about in a management accounting subject. So I teach a management accounting subject, and this subject is both a capstone subject and the last year management accounting subject. That is a bit weird because normally a capstone is a capstone, but due to a special design of our course, I still have to cover some of the specific content relating to accounting. At the same time, I have to provide the students with the capstone experience. So I have to think in what way I should connect all of these things together, so to give the student an integrated kind of experience of being an accountant. So in order to do that, I have to first to make myself familiar with the concept, the ideas of who is accountant and how they relating to the rest of the world. So because I know that many of you here come from non-accounting background, so I'll just spend about 2 or 3 minutes talking about who is accountant, who are accountant, and how they connected to the rest of the world. It is very important that when you design your assessment, very broad thinking is you think about your profession and a person that work in your profession, who they are in the society, how they connect to the rest of the world, how they connect to the rest of the nature. So accountant basically works in any organization. Every organization from the smallest to the biggest will need to have an accountant. And they keep the records of financial transaction and the movement of financial resources. And you know that with the nature of human society, any organization will need some financial resources in order to run. And because we trace the financial capital, the movement of it around the organization, so basically we can produce the reports that describe the activities of organization. And we produce the report to reflect how the capital resources of financial resources move from one account to another account, and how the value shift around different partners and different parts of organization or different parts of the society. Based on this report, then all kind of stakeholders, the managers of the company, all the executive boards, as you can imagine, of all the stakeholders within the within and without organization, they look into the financial and non-financial accounting reports to create an understanding about what the organization is doing and how it's performing. And then based on that, they can build the strategy and they can allocate the resources, the budgeting, as you're familiar with, right? How much money should go into this part, how much money should go into that part, and who's going to be responsible for what, because then depends on which areas is allocated the most budget. They may have to think about, okay, what responsibility these people do. And that will influence on the responsibility metrics within the organization. And that will influence on the HR and recruitment practice. It will influence on the performance metrics and how people are rewarded and incentive system. It will influence on how the corporate governance is going to be structured. And so basically by visualizing how an accountant relating to the rest of the organization as well as outside the organization, then I can put myself in the good position to start to connect the subjects that I teach with the rest of the discipline and the rest of other disciplines in the business field, and also other disciplines outside the business. So I just give you an example of what I did. So because some of this, all the green here, sorry, not the green, sorry, the blue one, all the blue box that you can see here are management accounting topics. And then we have any others like financial accounting areas, and then we have the corporate and auditing, assurance, tax, forensic is in another areas. When I want to integrate things, the first thing I have to do is I have to integrate my topics to each other, and then I integrate this topic to other topics in other subjects in my discipline. Then that is the first step. I build the connection within the discipline, within my subject, and connect that with the rest of the discipline. The second step is I start to think about how my subject is connected to other discipline within the business school. So for instance, when people make the decision on the capital investment, should they build this building or not? Should they invest in this machine or that machine, right? Should they install the solar panel? Then there's many considerations come into play, and the economics knowledge is important, right? And then the knowledge about the finance, cash flow, and NPV analysis, net present value analysis are important. The knowledge about the management and the strategy is important for this decision making. So basically, I can pull in the knowledge that the student need from other discipline. And now I'm start thinking about the next level of integration outside the business school. So I'm thinking about, okay, so the research in the budget, research about the budget practice actually talk a lot about the political issues in the organization that influence how much this area is being receive fund and how much other areas will receive fund. And then the research in the performance management aspects also talk a lot about the psychology of people when they being measured in one way opposed to another way, and then they start to play the tricks with the system, and maybe some unethical behaviors gonna come out of that. So by using research in the fields, I can connect that to some knowledge outside the business field, so psychology, sociology, law, etc. And when it comes to, like, let's say sustainability accounting, I can connect that to environmental studies, when we talk about the carbon accounting, etc. So that is the second step. Then I start to use that kind of concepts to visualize how I'm going to design assessment. So in my subject, I have two assessments. Assessment number one is an individual assignment, and assessment number two is a group assignment. The first assessment, I asked the student to start a business selling a product or a service of their choice, so they can design their own product or service. They can sell it everywhere. So I remember there's one student want to open a business that organize wedding ceremonies in Mars. So they're gonna fly people to Mars to organize the wedding. But anyway, any location that they want, China, Vietnam, Australia, or anything. Doesn't matter what is the service, what is where they want to offer it, but they have to talk about how the product or the service impact on the sustainability. And that is how I introduce the sustainability kind of thinking into their mind. And then after that, they create a purpose, a mission, and vision for their organization, and they have to set some medium-term goals. Then they have to develop the standard cost for the service and the product that they design. So now they start to see the connection between the way that they design the service and the standard cost. Some people come up with a super complex product and then end up with a very messy standard cost schedule, because they don't have enough knowledge about the production process of the product in order to develop a very good standard cost schedule. So they have to go back to cupcake or whatever it is. It's much easier and simpler kind of product that they have an understanding of. So now from this they can see, okay, your knowledge about the production process or the design of the service will influence on the cost. And then they have to use that to set the price and estimate the sales for the product. And now there is the time where they have to do the market research. They look around for the similar kind of products, and then they say, oh my God, my standard cost is just too high, because if I set the price above the cost that I produce, all other competitors are going to beat me because my price is just too high. Now they start to think about what kind of materials that they use and what suppliers that they choose for the production, and then that influence on the cost. So by this stage, the student already connect so many different knowledge that they have learned, including the marketing and the research and the operational productions design. And then after that, they have to develop the master budget for 1 quarter of selling this product to the market. And based on their estimated sales, they have to do the master budget, gonna include both the operational budget and the financial budget. And then they have to use Excel to do this budget. And then now they start to see if they're not good at Excel, they're gonna have a big trouble, because then if they don't know how to connect different cells, and if they don't know how to connect different parts of the budgets, the moment one element changes, they have to redo the whole budget. So in this master budget, there's so many different parts of knowledge come into pieces, and they really have to connect them in order to do a master budget well. Now, in this assignment, I don't have a separate components called integrated thinking in order to assess, because in my subject, there's only 4 categories of graduate capabilities, or the skills that you want to call it, to be assessed. Communication skill, critical thinking skills, digital capacity, or the analytical skills, and disciplinary knowledge skill. So in order to see the integrated thinking, I have to embed that into the critical thinking and the research components. Then I move to assignment 2. Now the assignment 2, the student come from the assignment 1, and then now they come together in a group of 4 or 5 students, and they will choose a product among all the products that they did in assignment 1. Now if they happen to have the similar product, that's great. They can form a bigger group of selling multiple products. If they come from, if each of them have a different kind of products, they can decide to choose one. And then they're gonna have to set up a more proper company on that, because they already have the budget. Now they will have to refine the purpose, mission, and the vision for the company, and they develop a strategy for the company. Now the strategy, they will have to use a balanced scorecard model, which is a very famous model in management, that say that the organization performance is the combination of a different parts of organization: financial perspective, customer perspective, internal business perspective, and learning and growth perspective. So they have all components in one model, which help them to connect different parts of the organization. And then they have to set the goals for the strategy. So each goals will need to have metrics to measure the track progress of the goals, and that is the performance measurement system. Then in order to realize the goals, they will normally people gonna have a very ambitious financial goals, right? Profit growth or revenue growth or whatever it is. And then they also have the goal about the efficiencies and reductions of non-value added costs. So that is a kind of very popular goals in organization. If you work in any organization, you will hear very people kind of talking about these terms very frequently. So they have to go back into the assignment 1, and then they look into the process of their operation, because they already did the budget for that, and they allocate the money for each part, right, of the operation. Then they have to identify the inefficiencies, and if they can, they have to remove them, and then they can improve the process. So the whole idea is to make sure that their process is as efficient as possible, and the resources that we put on the process is at least as possible. But still, we have to maintain the quality. So you will see this kind of discourse happen all the time in the organization. We remove the inefficiency. Then they have to develop the accounting practice to assess the sustainability performance. Because remember, in the first assignment, they have to talk about how their products improve or impact on the sustainability. And they have to talk about in what accounting practice that they do in order to improve the sustainability performance of their organization. And of course, identify inefficiency and improve processes to remove the waste can also be part of the sustainability operation. And then they have to develop the responsibility accounting system and incentive system in order to motivate people to achieve the strategic goals. So from the development of the strategy, they have to go through the whole chain in order to achieve the goals. They have to do that from the accounting perspective, but in order to do that, they have to really understand, for instance, for the incentive schemes and responsibility accounting system, they really have to understand the motivation theories, which basically come from psychology. And they have to understand about the HR aspect. If they want to understand about inefficiency and improve of the process, they have to understand about the costing, and they have to understand about the production management aspect, right? If they want to understand about the sustainability accounting practice, basically they also have to understand how different sustainability aspects play out in the organization of their choice. So basically, for this kind of assessment, I able to help the student touch on different parts of the disciplines as well as above the discipline and above the business school. And again, I try to find how this integrated thinking can manifest in the critical thinking and research skills. Now, if we combine the assessment 1 and assessment 2, then we have a bigger pictures of the whole management accounting field at the same time as accounting experience, because they touch on both the financial aspects of the operation, and they touch on the budgeting, and they touch on the strategy aspect, they touch on the operational aspect, they touch on the HR aspect, and they touch on the sustainability aspect of accounting. So it's quite comprehensive. And I have a reflection task for them at the end of each of this assessment about what is the difficulty when they do this kind of assessment and how they overcome that. And one of the very popular feedback I got, or reflection piece that I got from the student, is that they feel first they feel very difficult to connect the different parts when they do the master budget, but then when they move to the second assignment, they enjoy the process of working with others, and they realize that what they do actually influence the other person, so they cannot just divide the task and they do it by themselves, because they have to come together, develop the strategy together, and then agree on how things going to be built for the whole system. And of course, if someone just drop out of the group for 4 or 5 weeks, come back, they're gonna have no clue of what they have to do, and then that they're gonna be accepted in the group anymore, because they won't be able to contribute anything if they don't attend the first meeting on the strategy map. Okay, so the impacts of this system of this assessment on the student thinking. When I reflect on this kind of assessment, I think the student would be able to connect, to develop the thinking about the connection between the different functions within an organization, because from the budgeting process, they have to understand the process of producing a product. So that is more from the designer and engineering perspective. And then from that, they understand how that impact on the costing practice of accounting. And from that, they also understand how the budgeting going to, because the budgeting is about the resource allocation within the organization, and it will influence the performance of people later on. So they're gonna link that to the HR, and then also link it to the different various behavioral issues in organization. And they also see that how it influences the procurement, the people who purchase the materials and stuff like that, because everyone is allocated some budgets to run. and they have the knowledge about the connection of a different fields of knowledge, because as I just explained in the previous slides, accounting, economics, HR, marketing, finance, supply chain management, psychology, so different fields of knowledge has to be combined in order to, for them to do this kind of assessment. And then they can also see the connection between the different level of decision making. They can see that the way that the mission and the vision is set up influence the strategy of organization, and the strategy goals will influence the budget, and that budget will influence what's going to be done, what not going to be done, which assets going to be purchased, who going to be recruited, and it will influence on the costing, efficiency, production, performance management later on. So it's a more operational level. And they also will gain knowledge about the connections of decisions through time. So that is the time connection. So something that you do today, for instance, the decision on using this type of materials for the product in the designer process, in the designer phase, going to influence the whole they're going to travel through the whole chain and impact everything else down the line. And even though as an adult and as a person working in organization for a long time, we kind of thinking, oh, that is very easy to see and take for granted. But I remember when I was a student, I have no clue of this kind of connection. And if not for the assessment that I did, then I don't know how it's connected. And when I joined the organization, I kind of lost. And I don't know how I connected to other people in the team, how I connected to other people in the organization. I had no clue that we are working on the same goals for the organization. So, okay, so just visit again this one. I just put it here just to show you that. So the connection can be done within the subjects when you have a different topics that you can connect. You can stop here, that's fine, no problem. Then you can connect within the disciplines, or connect with other subjects within your discipline. That is a second layer, second levels of integration. Then you can also connect with other discipline within the same field, like the way I do with the management of finance or human resource. That is the level 3 of integration. And then level 4 will be across field. That means you go in and find whatever the knowledge that is needed. Doesn't matter whether it's come from sociology, psychology, or I mean, if you are in sociology, you may find something from accounting or from business that will influence on people, the way people work together, the way people interact with each other. So it is all depend on us and how we connect with others in the society who may do the different job. Okay, so the next question will be, how do I access integrated thinking? And because normally when you assess, you have an assessment, you will have to put down the rubrics, and then you have to give marks for each of the skills that you assess. Now, integrated thinking is not one of the graduate capabilities for La Trobe University, at least from my understanding. We focus more on the problem solving and critical thinking and research skill and teamwork skill, etc. So I have to do a bit of integrated thinking practice to integrate the integrated thinking into other skills. So I find that I can integrate the integrated thinking skill into critical thinking, problem solving, research, and teamwork skills. And I can highlight for you some of the point that I use in my rubric. So I look for the student ability to search for and assess the information from multiple sources or multiple disciplines. I assess the ability of the student to use the knowledge, different knowledge from different fields to solve a problem. I assess the skill to the ability to assess and resolve the conflict opinions among team members, and that can be done through the reflection of the group works. Then I also assess the ability to identify the root cause of the operational issues by tracing it to the related processes. I assess the ability for them to critically evaluate the impact of one process on other processes and vice versa. and the ability to assess the impacts or consequence of the solution that they propose to a different parts and aspects of organization and a different parts or groups of communities. And I also look into their ability to propose a solution that have the positive impacts on multiple stakeholders. So the way that they propose a solution, for instance, the way that they design the strategy, the way that they design the performance metrics, the way that they, analyze the activities, and then how they remove one process, also reflect on their view on which one is important, which one is not important. And if they can illustrate, they have a very integrated thinking in understand the values from a different perspective, then that will show the integrated thinking skill. Okay, so the maintenance of assessment, because all of us are busy, and so we think about assessment that's easy to maintain. But unfortunately, this kind of assessment is quite require hard work, and it's really required the commitments and intention from educators to make it meaningful. I normally observe the student performance on the parts of critical thinking and research, because that is where I focus on to assess the integrated thinking. And I revise the assessment, not revise in terms of the question, but more in terms of the rubrics and the learning activities or learning materials I can provide to them to foster their performance in the assessment. But the way that I design assessment is flexible, because I often just take whatever happened in the real world and I put into the assessment, and I give them more freedom. For instance, they can choose their own product, so they contribute in constructing the assessment, that the kind of work that they do. So someone who very interested in pets, they produce the pets birthday cake. So they're happy with that. They're very passionate in doing the kind of things that they love to do. So I have no problem with plagiarism or anything. Normally the Turn-it-in score for my students is around 6 to 10%, and it's mainly because of the reference, because they're very original and creative in the products that they come up with. But one tricky thing is that we will need to try to keep the same teaching team, because this kind of assessment normally require people to understand the philosophical underpinning of it. And therefore, if someone who also understands why you design this kind of assessment and what you're looking for in the student performance, in student writing, it will have a lot in improve the consistencies of the assessment. And I also keep a teaching portfolio, or you call it diary, to document my observation while I'm doing the marking, so that I can provide the support when the student need. Okay, so last slide, just a touch on this, and it's nothing, I'm not going to go into deep, but just to remind that integrated thinking is not isolated alone with assessment, because we will need first to create the integrated thinking into us as an educators. We have the intention, we have to build the mind of integrated thinking first. Then we combine that with the assessment and learning activities that are very of this kind of assessment, and the kind of materials. If we just use textbook, and of course the textbook will have a lot of different sources that they use to build textbook, but if we want to do that, we have to refer the students specifically to the design of the textbook, the kind of integrated thinking that is designed in the textbook. And then that assessment, the student will be influenced by assessment, by learning activities, materials, as well as the teachers ourselves. So again, to conclude this talk, I just want to say that the integrated thinking is really about connecting us with each other and connecting us with the rest of the world and life. And given our time is a special time when we really have to be together, to group together to tackle many big challenge of our time. Therefore, I hope that each of you who present, who are here, can give a thoughts, more serious thoughts about embedded integrated thinking into your curriculum design. And I'm more than happy to have more discussion or work with any of you to, share the experience and develop a better kind of curriculum for our students. Thank you so much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Thanks, May. Kate, sorry. There is a question in the text chat. I'm not sure if you've been looking for those. Lorraine Hurley asked, how are the individual 500 words combined and attributed in that second assessment task?
Yes, so they normally group in 4 or 5 students. So because at Trobe we have a policy regarding the student workload, and we have to kind of say group assessment 2,000 words, but then if 4 students, then every student is 500. And normally that is just a way to say that is the workload for this assessment for marking a location, and we pay for the staff who mark it, rather than we strictly say every student has to write 500 words. So they can divide the task within themselves, and some part might be longer, some part might be shorter, but I'm not keeping track of individual student words.
Great, thanks. Actually, there's been quite an active discussion in the text chat. The matter of generative AI has come up, not surprisingly these days.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, have you seen the likes of Ethan Mollick's work on getting generative AI to generate new business ideas? So that's kind of an interesting, I think, maybe extension of the kind of maybe the assignment 1 idea that you had there. Maybe get the students to collaborate with the generative AI tool to generate some business ideas and see how that works.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. Actually,
yeah.
at Trobe University, we have formed a committee, a kind of not committee, but it's like a community of practice, where we discuss the generative AI and how we can use that for education purpose. And I try it myself and find that we can collaborate with ChatGPT or generative AI to help our students, foster their thinking ability.
Yeah. I think that's good, because there's been, lots of talk about generative AI being a threat to, assessment in higher education, but it's also a big opportunity for us to provide, skills for our students moving forward, and thinking about ways of leveraging these technologies inside the assessment tasks, redesigning those assessment tasks to have that in mind. So yeah.
Exactly. Actually, I'm in another projects where we try to use AI for the preliminary assessment for the provide feedback for the students. Because we want to focus more on the more important task of giving feedback, so we kind of trying to use AI to provide some initial feedback for the students so that they can improve the assessment before the final submission. So we are on that project. And I think, yeah, I totally agree with you. We just have to go with the flow. And why the AI and generative AI is here, why there are various opinions. Some people say that is a threat to the human society. Later on, we don't know which thoughts come from AI and which thoughts come from human anymore. But we can't deny their existence. And yes, just have to study more on it and to see how we can utilize it rather than refuse it would be the way that I'm going.
Yeah, I think it's a work in progress, as they say, in terms of that. I did stick a link into a proposal for a AI literacy framework for higher education, and it had things like ethics and being aware of its affordances, etc., as part of that framework. And I think it's something that the educational community and the wider society, students, teachers, administrators, are going to have to work through. But
yeah.
Okay, folks, if there's any more questions, you're welcome to pop them into the text chat. We've still got a couple of minutes to go.
I read the question. I'd like to hear the logistic about the second assessment. Okay,
Yep.
that is the question that I already answered about the 500 words.
Yeah, let me just scroll up in the text
That's
chat.
one thing that's one issues that normally come up when we have a group assignments for this kind of, and I often hear my colleagues complain that when they have a group assignment, the student often kind of cut up the task into different chunk and then give to each of a person, and then basically they come back at the end of the day and then put them together and then submit. But this kind of assessment, when you intentionally join the dot and then you force them to work in group, and basically the first person, the second person can't do the job without talking to the first person, then it will help with that problem.
Yeah. Each
And when
person's
you
playing
read
a role in the overall team effort.
Yeah, and then it's very interesting because I used to read an assignment where the incentive system design has nothing to do with the strategy, and clearly I know that this person doesn't work with the group.
Yeah.
And then I can give the teamwork marks based on that.
Yeah. I mean there's a whole army of presentations just on group work and strategies people can use to make it, more effective and things. So peer reviews and calibrated peer reviews and all sorts of different techniques that can be used through there as well. But certainly
but also
the project itself.
I think also the point is when you create an assessment that is very authentic and it's very interesting, then the student quite like it. I don't have the problem of non-submissions for my assessment because the student do love it.
Yeah, it's, getting the students engaged in that assessment task and getting them to see the value in it. If people see value in things, they're less likely to want to, cheat on it, really.
And also, I find that when we give more control for the students in choosing the topic, then first we less the task for us in designing different assessment all the time. I keep the same assessment for 5 years now. So basically, every time I just change the due date and stuff like that, because the nature of the question is very open. But the point is, I like as I said, is tough when you mark. I used to read like 100 budgets on a 100 different products and services, and when I sleep, I also dream about the overhead costs and how they allocate overhead costs and what's the problem with that. So it's really tough, but then again, it's really we have to be fueled by our passion for education and for our students. There's nothing else that can fuel us in doing this kind of task.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to, are we over-assessing students? And if we are, maybe we would need to reduce the number of assessments and do better quality assessments for the ones that we do. So I think,
exactly. Yes.
Yeah, complex assessments like this are okay as long as you don't have a lot of small little ones that are chewing up all your marking time and budget as well. So
exactly. That's why I'm saying maintenance of assessment is important. The balance between the quality education and also our well-being, the teachers' well-being, is important. Therefore, maybe we can utilize ChatGPT and AI in this space, maybe.
Yeah, there's definitely potential, I think, to use these tools to help us do assessment more effectively. Okay, we are at the hour, folks. Thank you very much for coming along. Thank you very much, Kate. A fascinating and I think an important topic. This systems thinking, integrated thinking, is certainly something that's very important for the success of humanity, really. Now, the next session will be coming up on the 6th of September. The rough plan is to have something on the topic of guiding how to use generative AI in assessment. So there's a couple of speakers there. It's a joint session with the Assessment and Higher Education group from the UK. So thanks very much, folks, and hopefully we will see you again next month. That's all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.